My name is John Bowen. I'm a Vice President of the Chelmsford Amateur Radio Society, and we're in Sandford Mill looking at the old wireless stations. This is a replica of a ship's wireless station as around about the 1904-1907 period, and it could well be that this equipment was made in Hall Street. What we're looking at the moment is a magnetic detector, which was patented by Marconi and used exclusively for the reception of CW signals between 1904 and 1912, when the valve equipment was then introduced. It is also the reason why the ship never came to the rescue of the Titanic. The California was 10 miles away from the Titanic, and at 11:30, the operator, hearing Phillips sending messages, said, in my words, "Hello mate, how you doing?" And Phillips said to him, "Shut up, shut up, shut up. You are interrupting me sending messages which make our money." And the operator of the California was so upset at being told off by Phillips, who he knew quite well, he took the headphones off, put them by the side of the wireless equipment and went to bed, read for half an hour and then went to sleep. At around about midnight, the Titanic of course struck the iceberg and started to sink, and they sent out the SOS signals. Now at 12:30, Groves, the third officer of the California, had finished shift and was walking to his bedroom, and he came to the wireless room and he saw the headphones on the table as they are here, picked them up and put them on his head. He heard nothing. The reason is that the magnetic detector is a clockwork device which runs for 20 minutes and it's wound up by this key. But in the time between the operator of the California putting the headphones down and going to bed, it had wound down. And when it's not going tick, 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 and these wheels are going around, there's no signal. If only Groves had realized this and twiddled that key at the end, he'd have heard the airways alive with the SOS from the Titanic. As it was, he heard nothing. I think that if he'd have heard all the Morse and he was being trained gently to receive Morse, he wouldn't have necessarily made coherence of all of the messages, but I'm sure he would have gone to the wireless operator and said, "Look mate, I don't know what's going on, but the airways are alive, come and have a listen." And that didn't happen until 4:30, when the captain actually got the wireless operator out of his bed to actually have a listen around. And then of course somebody said that the Titanic is sunk, and he said, "It can't be, I saw them last night and listened to them at 11:30 and talked to them." And they said, "I'm sorry," and the Frankfurt then come up and said, "I'm sure that's correct, the Titanic has sunk." And then of course they realized that they'd watched the white rockets being sent up. Unfortunately, the Titanic wasn't given any coloured rockets, and the captain was very, very specific. Were they coloured rockets that were being sent up? No, they were not. They were white rockets. And the reason why was that the purser was told to get a box of rockets from the storeroom, and he unlocked it and grabbed the first box, and they were white rockets. They weren't coloured rockets. Every ship has 3 colours allocated to it, which uniquely describe that ship. And they put up just white rockets. Now, unfortunately, the Board of Trade vote 2021 says that if you do see a continuous stream of rockets or signals of any kind, then you are deemed to go and have a look in case it's a distress. But he chose not to, and he was never ever prosecuted for not doing that, but it did remain with him until he died as maybe an error. And unfortunately, as we know, that was, you know, the end of the Titanic.
What about that ship over there, about 10 miles away? You can see a light. Isn't she replying?
No, sir.
Well,
she'd blast our ears off if she did. The light on the horizon is a phrase commonly known in the story of the Titanic, in reference to the mysterious ship many people aboard the legendary steamer spotted way off in the distance during her sinking on the night of April 15, 1912. The ship failed to respond to the Titanic's distress rockets and CQD signals. Members of the mysterious ship's crew could see the Titanic in the distance and, as the story goes, didn't know they were witnessing the ship of dreams sinking right before their very eyes.
The Montrose story is that Captain Kendall on the Montrose from Antwerp to Quebec is sailing quite happily, and having gone past Ireland, he realized that there were a gentleman holding hands with his son. Now today we would still think that's a little bit funny, but in those days it was even more funny, and he twigged that the way that the son was acting was not really that of a gentleman. And of course it wasn't. It was Neve who was the lover of Dr Crippen, although they were booked on the boat as a son and a father. So he got his wireless operator to contact New Scotland Yard, or Scotland Yard in those days, and indeed Dr Crippen had disappeared from London, so they put 2 and 2 together, made 14, put Chief Inspector Hughes on a faster ship than the Montrose that overtook the Montrose in mid-Atlantic, and it got to the St Lawrence River, and it depart the Inspector Hughes at Father Point, now called Puerlepont, and they were dressed up by the #1 wireless operator of Father Point as pilots, put on a rowing boat, and with the genuine pilot rowed out to the Montrose when that came steaming up the river. They all climbed aboard, and the passengers on board watched them as 7 pilots climbed aboard. They took their clothes off and said to Dr Crippen, "I hereby arrest you," for murder, and also Neve as well. They were then handcuffed and taken back to, or taken on to Quebec, where they were put onto the ship, taken back. And of course Crippen was hung for the murder of his wife. Interestingly, somebody just recently has got hold of some DNA evidence of the body that was under the floorboards in his London house, and it appears that they were the bones of a man. So the story is, what happened to his wife? There is quite a bit of evidence to say that he went on 2 or 3 occasions from Dover to Calais carrying heavy suitcases, but when he came back the suitcases weren't quite so heavy. So I'll leave you to put your imagination as to what may have happened to his wife. Who the man was, we do not know. Do you know?
What part did a Marconi key play in the capture of Crippen?
Well, the whole lot. All the equipment was Marconi designed and Marconi installed, and more than likely manufactured in Chelmsford.
At Hall Street?
Well, there was also Dalston involved in the story, so it might have actually been a little bit from Dalston, but Hall Street, of course, was a main manufacturing element. So this is in the days before New Street came into existence in 1912.
Tell me about the sequence of Marconi messages that led to Dr Crippen's capture. Who sent the first message to who?
Well, the operator from the Montrose to Scotland Yard.
And what was that message saying?
Well, I think that I've got Dr Crippen and Neve.
So that was sent out in code or plain?
Plain. That would have been in plain. Yes.
So the Marconi wireless operator on the Montrose was instructed to send a message to Scotland Yard from the captain,
yes,
stating,
"I think I've got Dr Crippen and Neve."
And what was the reply?
Well, it would have been all the organisation about Jews is being sent to the St Lawrence River to intercept them, because they didn't want Crippen and Neve to land on Canadian soil in case they claimed immunity. This is the first time that wireless had been used to actually catch a murderer, and at sea as well.
ship. How big was she? What was she doing?
Well, she wasn't exactly the same size as the Titanic, but she was nevertheless a luxury boat. A first-class ticket in those days was about £15,000 in today's money. So the people who were travelling on it generally were very, very rich. And many people died on the boat who were very, very rich.
And what's the significance of what you're doing today? What are you doing and how important is it?
Well, we're commemorating the fact that all the equipment designed and manufactured by both the rescue ships and the Lusitania was made in Chelmsford. Without that, then it would have been a total disaster. It also changed the war because the effect was so bad that even the German High Command were taken on the back foot, and they actually instructed their U-boats not to sink any more passenger ships until 1917, when there was a telegram which was found and decoded called the Zimmermann telegram, and that then brought total warfare between Germany and England.
Okay, so the sinking of the Lusitania itself was hugely significant.
Very much so.
And is it right that that war? What did war mean for the development of technology such as the Marconi Wireless communications?
Well, unfortunately, as an ex-army officer, I know that there are no winners in war, but technology moves forward at a very rapid rate because every government involved in a war pumps money into it to try and gain supremacy.
Yeah, and what, I mean, by 1915, I expect the advantages of this sort of wireless communication in what you might call merchant seafaring were becoming pretty clear, were they?
The big turning point was 7th of January 1904 when Marconi issued a memorandum saying that the message CQ, which means calling all stations, and we're using that here today, should be then added with the D to make it into CQD, to determine between an ordinary message and a message involving a disaster. And that was the first time, because you've got to remember that Marconi was not paid to provide his equipment on the ships. He actually provided the equipment to gain the money from the wealthy passengers sending messages. They were charged 4p a word to send a message, or 8p if 8 pence if it was in code. And the messages were generally trite, like having a wonderful time, wish you were here, from the mid-Atlantic, or buy 1,000 shares in the Marconi Company because it seems to work well.
But when the Lusitania was attacked, the wireless communications, the wireless Marconi equipment played a very, very different role.
Yes, indeed. Yes, it then sent SOS, 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 MFA, 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 because MFA was its call sign. That was received at Crookhaven, and the Crookhaven wireless operator then sent out a calling all signals to the rescue boats. Three boats steered, which, when you think of it, was very brave for the captains involved because the place was awash with U-boats.
So what, I mean, I suppose that Marconi's equipment was fitted in the Titanic, wasn't it? And,
yes.
And was significant in that disaster.
Yes, indeed.
And how significant was it in this disaster?
Well, going back a little bit, Marconi was himself supposed to have travelled on the RMS Lusitania from New York. He was in New York with business, but unfortunately his business wasn't completed in time, so he didn't travel. But America at this time was neutral, and it was awash with German spies, and they would have known that Marconi was scheduled to travel on the Lusitania. And the diplomatic word is, get the Lusitania. So the Germans actually had a U-boat flotilla waiting for the Lusitania off Ireland. Unfortunately, there was a very big fog bank, which meant that a lot of them didn't spot the Lusitania. And in fact, Captain Walter Schwartz, who was the captain of the U-20, thought that he'd actually missed it. And then at the last minute, he saw this boat appear and thought, that is our boat. Yes, he had 3 torpedoes. He'd already sunk 5 boats before the Lusitania, and he was low on fuel, low on food, and just 3 torpedoes left. So he shot off just 1 torpedo